Hello chums, and welcome to Taming a Monster, the series where I take some of Gran Turismo 7's most ridiculous cars to see if I can tweak them so that a talentless pleb like me can handle them without being killed to death. Like any common ruffian, I'm using a bog-standard PlayStation 5 controller, and I have all driver assists turned off, except for ABS. Let's see what car is trying to murder me today! A Honda Civic seems a little bit tame for a series like this. However, this diminutive little EF has the option for the beefier B18C from the DC2 Integra. Better still, this is by far the lightest Civic in the game, which may make it more difficult to get the power down. Even better still, the EF doesn't have an option for a rear diffuser, so it gets less front downforce than other Civics too. As if all of that wasn't enough, I know for a fact that the default settings are rather a mess, so this should be quite entertaining. As usual, all upgrades have been applied, including power, weight, wide body, and the body rigidity increase. All of the settings are currently default except for front downforce, which is maxed, and the transmission, which has already been adjusted to suit this car. I've fitted aftermarket wheels that are bigger than standard. This can make the car feel quicker to change direction, but it can cause the car to be more unsettled when driving over curbs. It has a front splitter for front downforce and a rear wing for rear downforce. Both of the rear bumper options will allow you to increase rear downforce only, which is generally pretty unnecessary, so I've left the rear downforce at 150 points as if one of these options has not been fitted. If you're interested in learning more about aero, downforce, or any other aspect of tuning your car, I have a series called Tuning for Beginners which covers everything from suspension to differential to the transmission. Today's testing ground was the Autopolis circuit. The car got a semi-acceptable launch for a front-wheel drive. This is probably due to a distinct lack of torque, so as a result the engine is not spinning up the wheels and fighting for traction quite as much as you might expect. Once you approach a corner, it all gets rather awkward though, because the suspension is extremely soft, so the car wobbles all over the place, especially when changing direction. It's also extremely lightweight, so it is still fighting for traction out of low-speed corners. Nowhere near as much as something like the Suzuki Swift Hayabusa swap I tried not long ago, but it still causes some understeer. In a move that will surprise nobody, I increased natural frequency and anti-roll bars. This will reduce body roll and hopefully make the handling slightly more responsive. It will also stop the car lunging under braking, which can potentially cause wheel arch rubbing. The Civic was already much better. The reduction in body roll made the car feel considerably less shite. It still had a few negative handling characteristics though. For example, for a car so light it felt quite numb when turning into a corner, and is overall quite prone to understeer even when you aren't accelerating. To try and help with some of that numbness, I decreased the initial torque and braking sensitivity on the differential. I then increased acceleration sensitivity, which should help reduce power understeer. Those minor changes to the differential made a very noticeable positive impact on the car's overall agility, making it feel much nicer to drive. Differential adjustments are especially essential for front-wheel drive cars because a well-sorted LSD can save an otherwise underwhelming front-wheel drive car.
Why have you stopped?
Bloody Volvo drivers.
Ha!
For my final tweaks, I increased compression, which can help the car over curbs. I decreased camber, which can improve straight line traction and hopefully reduce wheel spin. I also added some front toe in to make the car even more agile when turning into a corner, and I added some rear toe out to reduce understeer when accelerating out of corners. The agility of the Civic was now dialed up even further, to the point where there was now some mild instability when braking. You could see this as a good thing or a bad thing, because technically any instability is not what you'd consider ideal. However, most front-wheel drives are overall stable enough that this is easy enough to keep in check. Better still, it gives you the feeling that you can throw the car into the corners, which makes it more fun. So, now it was time to see how the car would get on at the Nurburgring. Thanks to a slightly life-ending crash on my first attempt, I needed to raise the ride height a touch to prevent the car from bottoming out. Unsurprisingly, no further changes were needed though, since this is the least powerful car I have yet featured in the Monster Taming series. The Integra swapped Civic is a surprisingly restrained engine swap when you consider that I was driving a V10 powered van last time around. Even so, the B18C is arguably a little bit overkill for this car. Not that it's bad to drive by any stretch, it's just that the car is so nice to drive on its standard engine, not to mention that the standard engine sounds a bit better as well. A lot of the VTEC Honda engines suffer with a unique issue where the sound pitch does not change despite adding lots of upgrades that increase the redline of the engine. So while this B18C is revving to nearly 11,000 RPM, it only sounds like it's hitting 8,500, meaning it sounds slightly restrained. For whatever reason, the standard non-VTEC engine in this Civic does not have the same problem, so when it's fully upgraded, it sounds much more interesting. It also weighs less with its standard engine, and with 100 horsepower less, it doesn't spin the wheels much at all, so it handles its power almost perfectly. Once again, that's not to say this is a bad engine swap by any stretch. It's decently fun, and it's not too over the top. And it's not a K24! However, this engine, maybe, is better suited to the newer EG Civic, because that has the addition of a rear diffuser, which gives you extra downforce. In the end, the Civic managed a 6 minutes 50, which isn't too bad considering how little power this car has got. It's faster than the K20 Mini, which has over 100 horsepower more, the Porsche-swapped Citroën DS, which also has 100 horsepower more, and it's just behind the 800 horsepower Porsche 356. So, that was my attempt to tame a, admittedly not very monstrous monster. I hope my settings helped or that you enjoyed this video. Join me next time where I'll be driving something that's slightly more unruly. Thank you very much for watching, and if you're feeling particularly generous, I'd greatly appreciate your subscription. Take care now, and ta-ra.